Think about when you first saw the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast, right? The beast, big, snarling, hairy, scary animal, right? That can only have value in the world when he transforms into a beautiful, strong white man. On May 25th, 2020, George Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, was killed by 4 police officers, one of whom kneeled on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds and crushed his windpipe. We're all familiar. We saw it. We saw it happen. We saw the look on the officer's face as he consistently put pressure on this man's windpipe until he died, despite the fact that this human being was saying, "I can't breathe," and he was crying out for his mother. It was brutal as we watched this happen and play out on a national stage. Well, everybody in the world knows George Floyd's name. What you may not be aware of is the caricature of black man as brute that was developed by an 1890s writer, Charles H. Smith. What I want to know, and where my mind goes when I discovered the caricature of black man as brute, is where did it come from? It came from a group of writers from the 1800s. Their jobs as novelists was to tell stories. Now, going on in the background was this movement of negrophobia, which is very similar to the homophobic movement that was going on in the 1990s. This group of writers is negrophobic, and they're telling stories that characterize and create a caricature of black man as brute. They even go as far as to say snarling, wild animals. Now, here's how I want you to get it in your head. Think about when you first saw the Disney movie Beauty and the Beast, right? The beast, big, snarling, hairy, scary animal, right? That can only have value in the world when he transforms into a beautiful, strong white man. So let's relate this back to George Floyd. These officers, hundreds of years later, approached George Floyd not as if he's human, as if he's a snarling wild beast. An idea and concept that came from a group of novelists in the 1800s who first classified and created the caricature of the snarling wild animal equals black man. Think about this. This group of writers who were negrophobic back in the 1800s carelessly characterized the black man as brute. They created this caricature. Think about, like I said, the Disney cartoon. It's a cartoon version. It's not real, right? Now, fast forward to George Floyd, and black men are being killed because this idea that was carelessly created by white negrophobic writers in the 1800s is still alive today and informing our law enforcement who are killing black men. Even though he didn't exhibit any of that, anything that would be suspicious, anything that would cause alarm, these 4 officers, 4 on 1, think about that, 4 on 1, they approached him because they're still programmed from the 1800s by, again, this cartoon that's created by a group of novelists whose job it is to tell stories. Meanwhile, they're negrophobic, which is permeating their writing. These 4 officers in 2020 are still approaching one man who literally was peaceful and felt like they needed 4 people to hold him down. Where does that come from? It comes from the programming. It comes from the unquestioned programming. So I'm going to tell you about another novelist, and I'm going to read it so that you understand where this is coming from. And if you want to dig deeper on your own and critically think about this, we'll have links. We have links in the description, okay? So writers like the novelist Thomas Nelson Page popularized the images of the cheerful and devoted mammies and sambos in his early books and became one of the first writers to introduce a literary black brute. In 1898, he published Red Rock, a Reconstruction novel with the heinous figure of Moses, a loathsome and sinister black politician. The character of Moses tried to rape a white woman. He gave a snarl of rage and sprang at her like a wild beast. He was later lynched for a terrible crime. So let's think of the context of the time. There was no Netflix. There was no Prime. People mostly read newspapers and novels for entertainment. Who's the consumer of those books in the 1800s? Rich, educated, white men. Think about, okay, let's think about the power of entertainment, and let's put it in today's context, okay? Let's think about Ava DuVernay's When They See Us and what happened, right? That documentary reopened the case, and the people that were involved in oppressing the exonerated five were arrested, okay? Regardless that this happened in the 80s. Modern day, the documentary happens and the case is reopened, okay? Let's go back to the 1800s. The character, again, I want you to get this in your head. It's a character that was made up by novelists whose job it was to write and entertain. And think about the power of the written word. You're consuming the written word. It's programming you. And again, if you don't question it, the myth is going to perpetuate and stay alive and well until 2020, hundreds of years later. It's literally influencing everything. It's a myth. There's no fact based in it. Now, I want you to understand this. Writers, storytellers, right? The best stories are out of people's imaginations. They made this up. They made it up. And then think about, like I said, who's buying these books in the day, right? Again, the people that make the laws, the people that educate our children or the children of that time, the people who built cities, planned out cities, the people who did scientific experiments. All of these people, these white, wealthy, educated men, are being informed by this myth. We've got Moses that is offered up as a black rapist. Now, the actual law allowed the rape of black women by white men for hundreds of years. In fact, let me offer you up a fact. I'm going to read this because I want to get it right. Ironically, the rape of black women had been legal for hundreds of years. In fact, during slavery, when black women were sold as chattel, no Louisiana law made the rape of a black woman, slave or free, a crime. Rape was specifically limited to white women under the state's law. So again, let's look at the hypocrisy of the time. Who were the people that were doing the real raping? It was the white man raping the black women, not the character of Moses, the black savage snarling beast, raping the white women. Beyond the tragedy of the murder of George Floyd lies the question, When are we going to start paying attention to the hypocrisy that lies behind all of these incidences? When are we going to pay attention and wake up to the fact that while one finger is accusing, four are self-identifying? This leads me to believe that the 1898 caricature of Moses as rapist still lies in the psyche of non-Black people today. My question is, what would make these four officers treat George Floyd like a snarling wild beast, mocking him as he called for his mama, mocking him as he's calling out for his mother? For the last time in his life, the last time he's drawing breath, he's calling for his mama. And these four are mocking him. So in conclusion, as we're examining this situation, here are some of the questions I have. Officer Chauvin already had 17 complaints and one fatal shooting under his belt. Why was he still working? Why? Officer Tuthau had 6 complaints and was also still working. Why? Was George Floyd a modern-day Moses in the eyes of these negrophobics, these modern-day negrophobics? Who is the actual brute in this situation? George Floyd? Fuck no. It was the officers. Was George Floyd the brute, a modern-day Moses, in the eyes of these negrophobics? And literally, who is the actual brute in this situation? George Floyd? I beg to differ. So let's take rape into isolation, right? And I'm going to give you some statistics. The links will be below in the description box. You can explore it and make the decision yourself. In prosecuted rape cases, white men make up more than twice the number of Black men. So, in hard numbers, 57% of the prosecuted rapists are white men versus 27% of the prosecuted rapists are Black men. Now, while the killing of George Floyd is not related to rape, the idea that this Black man was murdered in the street for all to see triggers generational trauma of Emmett Till and many others. It triggers the generational trauma of Black men being lynched in the street for all to see. The question we need to ask ourselves is, where did this myth come from, and how did it become so deeply ingrained in the psyche of Americans that today, in 2020, a Black man was killed in the street like a snarling wild beast? Meanwhile, in reality, the people that are still doing the raping and pillaging are white men. Jeffrey Epstein, Harvey Weinstein, Matt Lauer, Charlie Rose, I could go on and on and on and on. They're the ones doing the rape and perpetuating this myth, not Black men. And I'll tell you what, the 3 men that raped me were white. One of them went on to rape at least 6 of my classmates. And none of them were brought to justice. Now, I take responsibility for that because I didn't report them. Because the culture that I lived in that school, gaslit women and told them that it was their fault. They demonized the victim, not the attacker, who were white men. Just think about that. We're being programmed. We're being programmed by myths that came from the 1400s, the 1800s, from a group of writers who were negrophobic and permeated that myth into their writing, which was consumed by white, educated men. How can you tell me that that doesn't inform what's going on today? It's psyche, and it's unquestioned thoughts and beliefs. Okay. So my hope is that you take one little bit from what I talked about and explore it on your own, and maybe start questioning things that have been unquestioned. Laws, policies, procedures, because it's based in fiction. It's not real. And we've been programmed to believe that a minority class is the perpetrator, and it's not. We are. And I hope that you come back and learn some more the way I'm learning. And thank you for spending your time with me.